Ya la 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 la. Hine ma tov. Ya la 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 la. Hine ma tov u'manaim. Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manaim. Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, here is what is good, umanaim, and what is pleasant. Shevet achim gam yachad, for us to dwell together. I will have you know that Reverend Katie Crow is teaching those words in the Hebrew to the Trinity, to her congregation, and we will sing those again together. In just an hour and a half or so as we join, as we meet down the street. In a moment, Noah is going to come forward and offer some remarks. I want to begin with words that I learned from my teacher, Reb Mimi. How many miracles did it take the Master of the world to bring together this group of people in this place for this purpose at this time? Many, many miracles along the way, and we are given a gift to see that every step along the way, every what seemed like misstep, every step forward, every step to the side, every bit of laughter, all the tears were a step towards this moment. Were a step towards this moment. I want to invite forward our president, Noah Pickus.
Now I shall sing. No. Well, we don't do this every day, do we? I just have two thoughts. One is when we started on this adventure, there's so much to take on and to think about. I confess it hasn't really been until almost yesterday that I really began to think about all the things that come to mind about space. I mean, we've thought a lot about space, don't get me wrong, but that this is our house. This is also our home. It's a cradle into which our children have been born. It's a grave into which many of our family and some of us will be laid down into. It's a fort that we need sometimes to retreat into. And when I was looking to finish out the list, I thought, well, it's also an ark as we go out onto the seas. And you can see, you can expand on that. You could all come up with 6 more or 20 more kinds of analogies. And I guess the only point I wanted to make is sometimes how rarely we think about all those things that a place is to us and is to us collectively. And as this moment has approached, it's become more and more meaningful, I think, to all of us. And that's why we're here this morning, because it's more than just a building, it's more than just a house. The other thought is that almost the equally obvious point, that it turns out that in renewing our building, it's really not about the building at all. It's about the people. And for me, one of the greatest things about this whole project, amidst all the many and ongoing challenges, is how many more of you I've gotten to know and to work with, in the way that you get to know people better when you actually work with them, when you engage with them on something. There are way too many people to thank right now if we're going to actually march the Torahs down the street. There are going to be other times to thank a lot of people for a lot of work on so many aspects. But I did want to note here those who've been directly involved on the front lines of the intersection of the building and the actual transition, like how we get out of this space and where we're going and how we're doing. Andrea, is Andrea here? Andrea started this with a transition committee. Tobin picked this up, and I don't know how. I showed up one day to work, and it was like, talk with Nancy. We're done. There are other things we need to work on. Drew and Sandy, who've been on the building and modernization subgroup of the large set of people who've been working on this. There have just been so many people doing this, but those of you, and Tobin, I see you right in front of me, so I'll use you to thank you and you as the stand-in for everyone. It's just unbelievable how much it takes to get this going and to get out of here that we've been for a while. So thank you from the entire congregation for everything you've done and everything everyone in here has done to make this possible. And last, it's just that this is not a sad moment, although it's a poignant moment. It is an invitation for us to think about our future together, particularly over the next year, and new ways to engage with each other. And after the high holidays, Kevin Leibel had some thoughts about that, which he and Matt Raskoff and others have developed a little, and I want to invite Kevin up to talk about that.
So I don't know if you were paying very much attention during the high holidays to Noah, but he mentioned that dislocation is an invitation to innovation. Any of you remember that? Yeah. So we were thinking about that, and we decided that we wanted to create an innovation fund where there would be some contributors. So if you haven't been solicited, there's always, I guess, opportunity for solicitation. And the innovation fund was created to be a catalyst. So during this time of dislocation, it's harder to get together. It's harder to do things as a group. It's harder to think about the future. And we thought, what can we do to develop the sort of an opportunity for people to do things differently and maybe a little bit disruptively and maybe a little bit creatively. So we created this innovation fund. I've got 2 pages of guidelines. It's actually pretty simple. And the whole idea is for you to have opportunity to do things differently and special and things which would build community and to help to make Bethel the kind of place that we want it to be now and in the future. So here's how it works. Well, there's 2 pages, but here's how it works. If you have an idea that you think maybe would benefit from some funding, we have funds for you. If you want to bring people together at your house, simple idea, and you want to have, I don't know, a piece of cake, we'll buy the cake. If you have a grander idea that is, I don't know, if I had the ideas, I'd be making my own submission for the innovation grants. Whatever idea you might have, we want to support it, and we want to create the opportunity for it to happen, be realized. And again, especially during these times of disruption. So I think we'll publish this, right? And it's a little bit of a guideline, but it's really about creating community. It's creating bonds. It's making sure that during this time that we get together and that we have the capacity and the means to do that. And that's what this fund is all about. So if you dream it, you have an idea, and you have the capacity, and you want to shepherd some idea, we're going to support you, and we'll support you with funds, and also with the Bethel leadership, and also the Bethel people to make things happen for you. How's that? Okay? Good. All right. That's it. So
Noah mentioned how we've sort of discovered and knew all along that while we are renovating this building, it's not about the building, it's about the people. It's about the stories. And so our own little version of the Monty this morning is going to be the Morty. And as our host for the Morty, we are inviting forward really the one and the only Kevin Ginsburg. If storytellers want to use it,
Okay.
they can just press that.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. So as a disclaimer to this first little snippet of a story I'm going to tell, I want to say that I specifically asked for permission from Gladys Siegel to tell this story. So if 90 seconds from now you have the urge to boo me, please know that you would also be booing Gladys Siegel. The very first time that I came to this building, to Bethel, was for Yom Kippur services 1999. I was 27 years old. I was kind of what you call a Jew boo. I hadn't really done anything Jewish since I was a teenager. And I came into this building for Yom Kippur services. I sat right where Tobin is sitting because I didn't know any better that I shouldn't sit so far up. And it was love at first sight. Everything about not just the building, the place, the community, the people, Rabbi Sager. It was love at first sight. Immediately after the service, it was the first Yom Kippur service that I'd ever stayed to the very, very end, all through all 27 Avinu Malkenus. And after the service was over, I was introduced to Rabbi Sager for the first time, right about over where Barry is sitting, standing up over there. And when he learned that I was, at the time, a massage therapist, he then soon after that called me up and set me up to give massage therapy services to an elder and ill and very important member of the community named Earl Siegel. I had no idea who he was. I did get to spend some hours with him over a period of a few months and got to see what a beautiful, amazing person he was through his smile and through some conversations. But the point of the story is, the Earl and Gladys Siegel Endowment is named after them, and because of a particular wardrobe malfunction and my being his massage therapist, I am really the only person here besides Gladys who can attest to just how well endowed Earl Siegel really is. Now, when I asked for permission from Gladys to tell this little story, she said, of course you can tell that. I've got a bunch of stories about Earl in this sanctuary that are far more off-color than that. We all have hundreds of stories arising out of this space, out of this place, this building, this house of God, this home of ours. And this morning we're going to hear 3 personal narrative stories from 3 of our longtime congregants. Again, with a hat tip to Jeff Polish of Judea Reform Congregation for bringing public personal narrative storytelling to Durham. We present to you the Morty. First up is the inimitable Sabina Sager.
How do I follow that? So the first thing I want to do is something that I don't get a chance to do very often. I want to take a picture of all of you. So everybody smile. And over here, because we may not get that picture again. It occurs to me that when I thought about stories to tell, I could have told about the first night that we spent in Durham at Gladys's house. I can't attest to anything else, but it was a wonderful event, meeting some of the people for the first time, who we knew that if we ever didn't come to Durham, we would miss all of these people. They were just important people in our lives. Gladys and Sam Levine and Ruth Greenberg and others that we met that first weekend. So we'll just put that aside, and let me tell you a story, since that's what I was asked to do, is tell specific stories. So I want to tell you how about I can still taste those brownies. As I recall, it was a Friday morning, just a few years after we arrived at Bethel, and I wandered in the synagogue just to see what was going on, And then I spotted Pete's car with the back filled with an order from Posen's. It must mean a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah was happening that weekend with cold cuts, pickles, and wait for it, Posen's brownies. The best, the chewy, chocolatey delight that only came from that delicatessen on the border of DC and Maryland. Now, Pete, who is actually Reverend Pete Brody, was the janitor of Bethel when we first arrived. He wasn't just the janitor, he was the building manager, the kitchen manager, and filled just about any position that the rabbi didn't fill, maybe even to preach on occasion, since he was an actual reverend. He was the only other employee of Bethel at the time. Before Shabbat, he would go out and shop for all the goodies that he would serve at the Oneg Shabbat that night. And his pineapples were the absolute best. You would walk into the social hall from this sanctuary. Now, the sanctuary didn't quite look like this. There was a bima up here, way up here, that you had to look up and before we renovated this part. So there have been many renovations. There was an 8 o'clock service on Friday nights. We would walk back into the social hall, which again looked different than it does now. Those of you who've been here for a while remember that there was a stage in the back. And behind the stage, the whole width of the social hall was the kitchen. So you'd walk into the social hall, and the tables would be beautifully set with tablecloths, flowers, and of course that amazing fruit that Pete had bought and masterfully set out. There was punch, there was some sort of cookies like Stella D'Oro and some cake. His wife Ruby would often help with the catering tasks. It was always a festive occasion following those 8 o'clock services. But I digress. Back to the brownies. That Friday morning that I remember was typical of so many bar bat mitzvah weekends. Pete and Ruby would drive their station wagon to DC, loaded up with Posen's cold cuts, fresh bread, pickles, brownies, and eclairs, all parv. And Pete and Ruby, along with some of their family or church members, would actually start preparing Thursday afternoon, sleep over in the kitchen in the back of the social hall, and continue preparing on Friday. They would prepare all the food for the Oneg Shabbat and for lunch on Saturday. Again, always festive, always lovely, always served with a smile. And cleaned up just in time for Pete to return to his home in Fayetteville so that he could preach on Sunday mornings. Pete and Ruby were gems. Even after Pete left Bethel, he and Ruby would return for certain events. They even catered our daughter Ariel's bat mitzvah 13 years after our arrival to Bethel. I miss Pete, but even more, I miss those brownies.
As a disclaimer to this next little snippet of a story I'm going to tell, I asked one of Rabbi Graber's elder advisors for permission to tell this story, Jared Resnick, and he said absolutely not, knowing that this could potentially embarrass Rabbi Graber a little bit. And I didn't like that answer, so I then went directly to the source, to Rabbi Graber, and asked for permission, and he readily gave me the green light. So this is January, I believe, of 2012.
Which I may regret.
January 2012, I believe, is when we had our 125th anniversary celebration here at Bethel. And it was a great event. It was one of the biggest services I recall ever attending at Bethel outside of a high holiday service or a Bierman bar mitzvah. And I was sitting way in the back where Donna Goldstein is sitting. And at some point during the service, Rabbi Frank Fisher came and tapped me on the shoulder to come do Hagbah, which I'd never done Hagbah before. I don't know that I knew what the word Hagbah was, but I got up here and somehow, without any training, I was able to get the requisite 3 columns out, and I think there was a little wobble, but it was okay. And then I sat down with the Torah right next to our brand new rabbi, Rabbi Graber, who I'd met a few times, but didn't know all that well at this point. At this particular time in my life, I was writing a weekly blog. It was a personal narrative storytelling blog I was writing every week. I was very proud of it. I had literally tens of readers around the country. And in that blog, I would obsess about all kinds of etymological and linguistic type things. And on this particular week for this particular blog, I was really obsessing over the letter H. And not just H, but I needed an HH, 2 different words that started with H. So that's what I'm obsessing over as I'm sitting there pretending to watch somebody read the Haftorah, and Rabbi Graber is sitting next to me, kind of chatting away. And at a certain point, while I'm obsessing over the letters HH and the Haftorah is being read, Rabbi Graver leans to me and says, "Kevin, I hate Haftorah." Now, of course, Rabbi Graber does not actually hate Haftorah. He was being silly with me. Perhaps he was one of my 10 readers and was just throwing me a bone. But really, for me, it was one of my favorite moments in the sanctuary, and it was a great representation of this community, of how we combine joy and fun and silliness with the profound and the spiritual and the religious. And we are co-creating a community. We're all consumers and producers of this incredible community that I'm very proud of, and I hope that does not embarrass our rabbi too much. One of my tens of readers of that blog was Krisha Miller, and she's a Jewish mother and former staff member at Bethel, and she's going to come up here to tell our next story.
I've stood on this bema many times, but I just want to tell you about a few times. A few years ago, I stood on this bema, and I was holding back tears of joy, having just signed my Hebrew name on a ketubah, a wedding contract, and looking out over a room full of beaming faces. But this was not my simcha. I was not signing as a bride that day. However, I was a bride on this bema, just a little over a decade previous. I signed a ketubah that day too, beautifully created by the same Bethel artist, Galia. For 18 months leading up to my wedding, between our engagement and the actual day, I looked at this building in terms of planning that event. The library for the ketubah signing and my veiling the bedekin with our family, the main ceremony on this bema, the rabbi's office for our yuchud, mine and Sid's 18 minutes alone to reflect on the wedding before we rejoined our guests in the social hall for music and dancing and feasting, and some of that music was from Bethel members. The feasting was prepared by the Fangmeyers, and the lobby was a great place for kids' activities. We had tons of kids expected that day, so we set up tables with crafts. Our wedding was in March of 2004. And as we constructed the stage for our band, because somebody had torn up the stage that used to be there, and did other minor prep on Saturday night, we could hear a joyous celebration next door. Next door, the band that was going to play for us the next day was with the community honoring Rabbi Sager's 25 years at Bethel. The next morning, we continued our preparations to the sounds of the Sunday school kids, who were not yet Talmud Torah kids. They were Sunday school, religious school. They were singing in the sanctuary while Rabbi Sager was teaching an adult class in the library. By noon-ish, we got the building to ourselves, and my friend Kathleen joined me in the social hall bathroom to help me get ready. We discovered a problem, though, when she went to plug in the curling iron. That bathroom, like most of that social hall, has no outlets. So we gathered our supplies and we relocated to a small corner of the kitchen. I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations on any health code violations have expired by now. And if they haven't, we're going to tear stuff up anyway. So from my stool, I got to watch the Fangmeyers work their kitchen magic while Kathleen styled my hair. Now, at that time, Laura Quigley was interim administrator, and a couple of months later, she was selected as Bethel's first executive director. And she was allowed to hire some staff. And so that fall, I joined on the staff as administrative assistant. On one of my first days of work, Laura gave me a behind-the-scenes tour of the building. And it was on this tour that she pointed out what she casually referred to as the bridal room. So she must have noticed my eyes widen and my ears perk because she immediately cringed and was super apologetic. Did I not tell you about that last spring? So it really was a lovely space. And Rabbi Graber mentioned yesterday about a mezuzah going where you let people stay the night. Many people have stayed the night in that room. It's now the teen lounge. But it was a lovely space with a big couch and a huge mirror and working outlets. Over the following decade, I learned much more about this building. I learned about the mice. I learned about the bats. And I learned where to place buckets and empty trash bins when expecting rain, where to find where to spray the air freshener in the air handler room when that ever elusive smell would peak. It was not brownies. And one day, as with any home, new issues consistently arise. And one Friday, while preparing for Shabbat, as well as a congregant Sunday wedding, Laura and I were horrified to discover yet another new leak. It was actually raining in the sanctuary. Thankfully, it was dry for the simcha. So Bethel became a second home. I'm sure I had, for quite a while, many more wakeful hours here than at my first home. And the congregation became my family. And that's what brings me back to the first wedding I mentioned. That day, in May of 2015, I had the honor to sign as a witness for a wonderful Bethel couple who had been together for decades, celebrate their legal union. It was a historic event, not just for Bethel, for North Carolina. 2 women stood under a chuppah on this bima with our rabbi, and they were declared legally wed. Not only in the eyes of God and in the eyes of our community, they were declared legally wed in the state of North Carolina. It took another month for the Supreme Court to get it together and the rest of the nation to catch on. But it was another amazing step in an ongoing struggle for justice. And as I stood with them, I was so proud to look out and see my 5-year-old daughter witnessing this wondrous event without even realizing why it was so significant. She saw all she needed to see. She saw 2 loving people making a commitment in front of their friends and their family in this very special place. L'dor v'dor, generation to generation, we will be back, and in the meantime, our community will continue to learn and to grow together, wherever we are, together.
Thank you, Krisha. And because we are transitioning soon to Presbyterian Standard Time, I am going to, we're going to spare Rabbi Sager of any disclaimers I might make or any stories I might tell for him and introduce our next speaker, which is Barry Yeoman. We're going to finish up today with Barry Yeoman.
It's interesting to hear the erstwhile stage invoked over and over. We never called it the stage. We called it the queer section. And in fact, that is where my story ends. It ends in the queer section, in back of the sanctuary up on the stage. As the ark is closing, Yom Kippur 1993. That's where it ends. But it starts 6,000 miles away, and 10 days earlier, at the Choral Synagogue in Vilnius, Lithuania. I had traveled to Lithuania and Poland as something of an ancestral quest to see the places my great-grandparents had migrated from, and to see what was left of Jewish life in Lithuania. In Vilnius, I stayed at an unheated hotel. I drank a lot of fruit tea to keep warm, and I met a woman who recognized my grandfather's last name from the Kovno ghetto. Naturally, on Erev Rosh Hashanah, I wanted to attend services, so I went to the Choral Synagogue, the last remaining temple out of 100 that used to dot the city that was known as the Jerusalem of the North. It was a grand building with arches and balconies and a dome that had a skylight in the shape of a Star of David. And it was there that I met a woman named Rachel Apriskate Waldstein. She was in her 70s, an English professor and a Holocaust survivor, with bright eyes and a voice that helped me understand where my own family's Brooklyn Bronx accent came from. And she was the only woman there with enough chutzpah to sit in the men's section. We became fast friends. We spent a lot of time together over the next week. We attended a performance of Israeli dance, which she dismissed as the same sentimental pap that comes to Vilnius every year. I rented a car and we took a road trip to Kibartai, her village, where her family had been slaughtered during World War II. And it was sometime during that trip that she turned to me and asked me a question that has stuck with me for the last 25 years. She said, your synagogue back home, do they have children there? Fast forward a few days to the Nihilus service here at the end of Yom Kippur. I'm sitting in the queer section. No Moorish or Romanesque flourishes here, just clean, mid-century, modern lines that to me represent this place's egalitarianism. It's getting dark. And you know that 25th hour of fasting, that moment when the endorphins are squirting and there's a clarity and resolution that you can't quite muster the other 364 days. And your emotions are heightened, not distorted, just clear and present and maybe a little more feverish than usual. And we're singing that final Avinu Malkeinu. Aseh Imanu. And Rabbi Sager invites the children to come up to the bima and close the ark. Tzedakah v'chesed. That invitation releases a river of children who are now in their 20s and 30s, some of whom might be here today. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. And I swear that moment released a river in me, a river that has never stopped flowing. I thought of Rachel's question, a question born of attending a synagogue in a city tied more to the past than to the future, a city where precious few children are being born to replace the many who were wiped out. And I thought of this place, this home we have created that always looks to building the future. Every Yom Kippur here, I promise myself, this is the year that when the gates close, I will not totally lose it. Every year, I totally lose it. That's what it means to be part of a community connected to a past and to communities around the world, but always, always returning to a place I've come to call home.
Thank you, Kevin, for the gift of bringing these stories to us, and thank you to all our storytellers. My friend, our teacher, our guide, and the person from whom I have been given this wonderful, wonderful community to be a part of, Rabbi Sager.
You make me think of a verse in Isaiah. It's way deep in Isaiah. When your children are saturated with the divine ways, then the life of all of your children will be peace. There's another version of that manuscript found at Qumran and other places that reads, not when all of your children are saturated with the ways of the Lord, but when all of your builders are saturated with the ways of the Lord. Just one little letter difference. It's something that is picked up in the imagination of sages for centuries and centuries. They say, Al tikra banayich ela bonayich. Don't say children, say builders. When children and builders are fused together and become one, then there is a possibility that we can claim and be claimed with all of the sophistication of builders and all of the imagination and wonder of children. How is it that we apply our experiences? How is it that we apply our knowledge? How is it that we go and grow forward, soil and soul, and upwards and building and just right, and keeping our eyes open with a kind of fascination and imagination that we know is present with children, but we sometimes feel like we have lost or that we have had to forfeit because of the claims and the needs of the everyday. It infuses in a certain way the Talmud in the little bit of text of which I will speak. The bricks and mortars and glass of Jewish community that get put up and established wherever it is that we go and have since a great explosion that took everyone out of a homeland centered in a particular place into the rest of the world, that blueprint, the bricks and glass and mortar of a community's life, has been the way in which we interact with each other, how it is that we learn, how it is that we deal, how it is that we buy, how it is that we sell, how it is that we develop, sign our contracts, live our lives, pay attention to each other's needs, civil needs and criminal needs, and the needs of claiming space and being claimed by space. Well, in the Talmud, most of this is incorporated in three structures called gates, because the Talmud is very interested in the actual structures within which we live, and gives this name, the name of the gates, the ways in and out of a city, the ways in and out of a life, to three different tractates. One tractate talks about criminal and about civil laws and procedures, and one of them talks more generally about torts, and the third of them talks about property. The first of those two gates actually are extended expositions on biblical texts that stand at the center of our imagination. But the last one, Baba Batra, the third of the gates, that one has nothing to do with a biblical verse, but it has everything to do with
how it is that we ensconce our lives, something that's been hiding in plain sight, that the Bible doesn't talk about particularly, not enough to summon up the basis of a whole tractate of Talmud, but about how it is that we build property, how it is that we acquire property, how is it that we share responsibility. That's the third gate. And in some ways, it's the most wondrous, that combines all of the sophistication and all of the fine-tuning that needs to be in development, that needs to be in building, that needs to be in construction, that needs to be in shared responsibility. How all of that very, very linear procedure actually is fused with the childlike and that which is open and that which is wondrous. Here's the text. When the Talmud says, you can, if you share property with people, if you live in a shared courtyard, you can mandate that something that is for the betterment of the community be built, and everyone is required to have a share in that. For example, a gatehouse. If you're living in a courtyard community, you can mandate that a gatehouse be built, and everybody has to be a part of that because that's a value for the community, right? Along came somebody and added to that very sober, very linear conversation. Yes, but there was a time when someone decided that he was going to build a gatehouse on behalf of a community, and Elijah the prophet of blessed memory, Elijah the prophet had been in the habit of coming to study with that person, and he stopped coming. Really? That's what you want to add to this sober reflection? That's what you want to add to a linear reflection on how it is that we built and how it is that we assess and how it is that we deem what's valuable and what is an appreciation of our property? You want to say that all of that is over here, but Elijah stopped coming. But really? Can't we say that a gatehouse is important after all? Isn't it really important to have a gatehouse? Doesn't it add to protection? Well, if you're balancing this against that, the argument relented, or the arguer relented and said, if that gatehouse is built within the footprint of the building, if it's an incursion, if it's inside the footprint of the building and doesn't extend to the building, then it's okay. Because somebody in need who comes and cries will still be able, as it were, to enter into the courtyard and cry out. Under those conditions, Elijah would keep coming. So the person who built the gatehouse must have built it on the outside as a protuberance from the structure. But isn't a gatehouse still a good idea? The argument goes. And the one who responds says, well, if you build a gatehouse and it extends outside, if it protrudes from the courtyard, Elijah will still come, providing you don't put a door on it. It's just a place where somebody can sit. But isn't it still a good idea? The Talmud says. And the other side of the argument, well, yes. The truth is that even if there's a door on the gatehouse, as long as there's no lock on it, Elijah will come. But if it's on the outside and there's a door on it and there's a lock on the door, Elijah's not going to come. But still, do you think that a door, even with a lock, is such a bad idea? Well, the other side of the argument continues. If it's on the outside and if there's a door and if the door has a lock, but if the lock is actually on the outside, so that it serves to keep the door shut but it doesn't keep people out, then Elijah will still come and be part of the structure. The sophistication, the linear sophistication, the building sophistication, the sharing of burden, the amelioration of property, the deeming of something as being an asset, so linear and so sophisticated and so extraordinary and so wonderful, but the wild and wide-eyed fascination of having Elijah present, even so. And that's where the curtain comes down on this little piece of Talmud. But it leaves us with what? With the idea that there are Elijah blueprints. If you're building a building, but it keeps out the people who need to get in. If you're building a building, but it doesn't allow for accessibility. If you think you're making an improvement, but all you're doing is putting up a wall that separates people from their needs, from their inner needs and from their communal needs, and from a place where their personal needs can be met, from a place where they can be comfortable even being uncomfortable, from a place where they can sit in a section way in the back and feel like they're way in the front. And from way in the back, they can be transported through time and space to some other place. If you're building a building that doesn't allow for Elijah to be present, then you're not building the right building, and you're not doing the right thing. We have taken so much care. The building that we are building has a kind of intelligence that we don't even know yet because it hasn't happened. But if we're doing it right, there will be ways to invite Elijah in. We hope, I hope, and pray, and know, because the community grows organically, as itself, into itself, within itself, beyond itself, into a larger and wider community, that children are builders, and builders are children, and that with all of the sophistication and all of the tools and all the linear thinking, that there is something else. There is an idea that Elijah needs to be present, so that when we gather together, there's something bigger than ourselves, something that will take us by surprise, a phrase, a melody that will transport us and allow us to be here, wherever here is and whatever here looks like. Aseh imanu. Vehoshienu Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Vanenu Kien Banu Mazim Aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed Aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed v'hoshienu. It feels a little bit like Ne'ilah. There's a time pressure. So a couple of introductions, some important people for the next few moments, and then we will move forward. First of all, I do just want to make sure that people have gotten a chance to meet and to get to know Nancy Luberoff, who is our interim executive director and who has carried our community in an extraordinary way over the last few weeks, for whom we are very grateful. I want to point out, where is Saul Levine? Where is Saul? Okay, Saul is in the back. He has been to Trinity before. He has 6 places in his van. So if you are not up for the walk, then you can go and find Saul, and Saul can lead others to drive over to Trinity so you can meet us there. So just want to make sure that people have a way of getting there if you are not feeling up for the walk. It is a little chilly. I have my coat on already. And finally, I want to introduce Rabbi Meir Goldstein from Elon University, and Sandy and Hannah, Betsy and Hannah, who are here. And as part of our ceremony, we're going to hand off 3 of our Torahs to them. Those Torahs will be in good care with the Hillel, with that Jewish community over in Greensboro, and we pray that they bring you much learning, and we know that they will be in good care, and we'll be ready to take them back when the time comes.
There are many names for this, for a synagogue. Beit Knesset means literally a house of gathering. Beit Midrash, we use this space as a house of learning. And of course, we use this space as a Beit Tfilah, as a home for our prayers. So in the next moment, what I'm going to do is invite us to stand and to say one last silent prayer. Whatever words you need to say in this place, whatever memories come to you, at the end of that short period of silent prayer, we will conclude as all Jewish prayer does. I will read the Tfilat HaDerech. That's not how all Jewish prayer concludes, but I will read the Tfilat HaDerech in Hebrew and in English. The Tfilat HaDerech is the prayer for a journey, We are then going to sing Oseh Shalom, and I want to invite everyone somehow, like we do on Yom Kippur, to come up to the gates, to come up to the bima. And in front of the ark, we will chant our liturgy for opening up the ark, and we will open the ark and hand those Torahs to representatives from Ilan, and we'll need 2 other Torah carriers. We have our chuppah. The chuppah, whenever I've seen Torahs traveling, there's always a chuppah. So we need 4 chuppah holders. So I'm going to depend that it's just going to somehow happen. We'll bring the chuppah up, and then we will begin our march. And along the way, we haven't planned this out. We'll depend on each other for some songs, for some melodies, for whatever it is that needs to carry us to the church. When we get there, the room you're looking for is what they call the fellowship hall. Okay, the fellowship hall. The best way I can describe it is, as you know, the church is on Trinity Avenue between Gregson and Duke, and there's an entrance off of Gregson. That's sort of the front part, and then you have to go upstairs and walk to the back of the church, or there's an entrance on the back part. We're going to go, Reverend Coe has told us to go in the courtyard entrance, which is actually off of Trinity. So that's where we're going to be walking, but somehow find your way to the fellowship hall. We shall be guided, we will make it, and we look forward to what the road has to offer us. So, a brief question, yes? Awesome. Yeah, so park in the Trinity Avenue parking lot, which is for people with disabilities, and the elevator is right there. Please rise. We take a moment for private prayer. Adonai, Sfatai Tiftach. Adonai, open our lips, Ufi Yagid Telatecha, and let our mouths declare your praise. Yiratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu. May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors. Shetolichenu l'shalom. Guide us to peace. V'tatidenu l'shalom, v'tismechenu l'shalom, v'tanchenu el mechoz cheftzenu l'chaim u'l'simcha u'l'shalom. May the journey to our destination be peaceful. May we arrive vital, joyful, and content. V'tachsirenu levetenu l'shalom, and return us to our home in peace. V'tatzilenu mikaf kol oyev v'orev v'ason b'derech u'mei kol minei pur'aniot ha'mitrakshot lavo la'olam. ותשלח ברכה במעשה ידינו ותתננו לכנו חסד ורחמים בעיניך ובעיני חוררינו. Please protect us from every danger on the way, from every difficulty on the path. Bless our mission, and may we enjoy the grace, loving kindness, and compassion that either you or others have to offer. ותשמע כל תחנוננו כי אל שומע תפילה ותחנונים אתה. Listen to our voice and our concerns, for you are the God who hears prayer. Baruch ata Adonai, shomea tefillah. Praised are you, Adonai, who hears and listens to prayer. Amen. Ose shalom bimroma.